I always believed that being a mother meant unconditional love. But I was wrong. Because the person who tried to rip my child away from me wasn't a stranger or a distant relative. It was my own mother. From the outside, people thought we had the perfect family. My mother was respected in the community, admired for her strict sense of discipline and her unshakable presence. But behind closed doors, that discipline turned into cruelty, and that presence became suffocating. When I became a mother myself, I promised my baby that I would break the cycle, that I would give her the kind of love I had always longed for. But instead of supporting me, my mother treated my decision to raise my child differently as proof of my weakness. "You're too soft," she would say, her lips curling in disapproval as I rocked my baby gently to sleep. "You'll spoil her. You don't know how to raise a child." First, I brushed it off. I thought maybe it was just her way of adjusting, of realizing I wasn't her little girl anymore but a mother in my own right. But it didn't stop. Every visit turned into an interrogation. Every smile I gave my daughter became evidence of incompetence in my mother's eyes. The breaking point came one stormy afternoon. My daughter had been sick, fever burning her tiny body, and I refused to leave her side. I whispered lullabies, pressed cool cloths to her forehead, and prayed for the fever to break. My mother stormed into the room, her voice sharp as knives. "You're coddling her. You're not strong enough to raise this child. If you really cared, you'd let someone responsible take over." Her words cut deeper than the storm raging outside. But I held my daughter tighter, whispering back, "She's mine, and I'll protect her with everything I have." I didn't realize then how far my mother was willing to go. A week later, a formal letter arrived at my door, a court summons. My mother had filed a case against me, declaring me an unfit parent. She wanted custody of my child. The ground seemed to collapse beneath me. This wasn't just criticism anymore. This was war. I barely remember the days that followed. Endless documents, frantic meetings with lawyers, sleepless nights filled with terror. I wasn't wealthy, I wasn't powerful. All I had was my love for my child. But would that be enough against the woman who had controlled me my entire life? When the first hearing finally arrived, I stood in the courtroom trembling. My mother sat across from me, calm and composed, her lawyer painting me as unstable, irresponsible, unworthy. Every accusation was like a blade. Every whispered judgment from the audience pressed on my chest like a weight. But then the judge entered. Not just any judge, the Chief Justice himself. His reputation was legendary. Sharp, uncompromising, and known for cutting through lies like glass. As he looked around the room, his eyes lingered on me, then on my mother. Something flickered across his face, as if he recognized the dynamics immediately. And with a single sentence, he shifted the entire course of the trial. The silence in the courtroom was thick, almost suffocating. My mother sat tall, her chin lifted in triumph, convinced she would finally crush me once and for all. Then the Chief Justice spoke. His voice was calm but carried an authority that made everyone lean forward. "Before we begin," he said, "let it be known that in cases involving children, the truth will always reveal itself, and no claim of power or reputation will outweigh the best interests of the child." My mother's confident smile faltered ever so slightly. Her lawyer launched into a fiery speech, painting me as reckless and negligent. He described me as a dreamer, unfit for responsibility, and mentally fragile. My mother nodded solemnly at every word, her eyes fixed on me like daggers. But when it was my turn to speak, something unexpected happened. I was trembling, my voice unsteady, but as I looked down at the tiny hands of my daughter clinging to me in the courtroom, strength surged through me. I wasn't just defending myself. I was defending her right to grow up in love, not control. I spoke of the nights I stayed awake by her crib, the hours I spent ensuring she was safe, the joy of watching her first smile, her first step. Tears slipped down my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away. They weren't weakness. They were proof. The Chief Justice listened intently, his gaze piercing yet kind. Then he turned to my mother. "Madam," he said, "why do you believe your daughter is unfit to raise her own child?" My mother's expression hardened. Because she's soft. She doesn't have the strength. Children need discipline, not coddling. Left to her ways, the child will grow weak, irresponsible, just like her. Her words hit me like stones. But something in the Chief Justice's eyes shifted. He leaned forward, his voice cutting through the tension. Strength, he said, is not measured by cruelty. And discipline without love is not discipline at all. What you describe is not care, it is control. A hush fell over the room. My mother's face flushed, but she quickly tried to recover. I only want what's best for the child. My daughter is emotional, unstable. She doesn't know what she's doing. I have experience. I have resources. The Chief Justice raised his hand, silencing her. Experience means nothing if it is rooted in fear. A child who grows in fear grows broken. Tell me, madam, are you trying to protect your grandchild? Or are you trying to relive your control through another generation? Gasps rippled through the courtroom. My mother's composure cracked. For the first time, she looked small, cornered by truth. Her lawyer tried to object, but the Chief Justice waved him off. He then asked for evidence, real evidence of neglect or abuse. There was none. No hospital records. No police reports. No complaints from neighbors. Nothing. Instead, there were letters of support from my friends and colleagues, who had come forward to testify to my devotion as a mother. One even said, "She loves her child more than she loves herself." Isn't that what motherhood is? I looked across the room, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight of my mother's power begin to slip away. But she wasn't finished yet. My mother had one last card to play, something she had kept hidden, something she believed would destroy me. As she rose to speak again, her voice dripped with venom. She is hiding a truth, one that proves she should never have been trusted with a child. The entire courtroom leaned forward. My heart stopped. What was she about to say? And then, she revealed a secret I had prayed would never come to light. The words dripped from my mother's lips like poison. "She is hiding the truth," she said, her voice echoing across the courtroom. "She suffers from depression. She has struggled with breakdowns in the past. How can someone so weak care for a child?" A ripple of whispers spread among those seated. I felt the heat rush to my cheeks, shame clawing at my chest. Yes, it was true. Years ago, in the aftermath of heartbreak and betrayal, I had struggled. I had sought help, I had been vulnerable. But I had fought through it, rebuilt my life, and found strength in becoming a mother. Yet here was my own mother, weaponizing my past to strip me of my present. The Chief Justice looked at me quietly. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice steady. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling as I gripped the edge of the table. For a moment I thought about denying it, pretending it had never happened. But then I looked down at my child, her big innocent eyes searching mine, and I knew I couldn't build my defense on lies. "Yes," I said, my voice breaking but clear. "I did struggle. Years ago, I reached a point where I needed help, and I sought it. I worked through it. I faced it head on. And if anything, it made me stronger. Because I know now what it means to fight for life, to fight for love." The courtroom went silent. The Chief Justice leaned back, his expression unreadable, while my mother smirked like she had finally secured her victory. Her lawyer pounced. "Your Honor, this is exactly our concern. A history of instability." But before he could finish, the Chief Justice raised his hand sharply. "Enough." The room froze. He turned to me again. "Do you know what I see in your words?" he asked. "I see honesty. I see courage. Too often, people bury their struggles out of fear of judgment. But you did not hide. You acknowledged your weakness and transformed it into strength. That is not unfit parenting. That is resilience." My throat tightened, tears spilling down my cheeks. For the first time, someone in authority saw me, not as broken, not as weak, but as human. The Chief Justice then turned to my mother, his gaze stern. "And you, do you not realize what damage you inflict? To use her vulnerability as a weapon, to shame her for seeking help, that is cruelty. Would you rather a parent pretend to be perfect while suffering in silence, than one who confronts their pain with honesty and heals? My mother's lips tightened. She had no answer. The spectators murmured, some nodding in agreement, others exchanging glances that said more than words ever could. But my mother, relentless as always, tried once more. She is naive, easily manipulated. People take advantage of her. If the child remains with her, what protection does she have? The Chief Justice studied me for a long moment, then said slowly, protection does not always come from power. Sometimes it comes from love. And from what I hear, this child has more love in her mother's arms than she would ever find in a palace of cold authority. Felt like lightning struck the room. For the first time in years, I watched my mother falter. Not because she lacked words, but because her power, her narrative was slipping away. Still, I knew her too well. She wasn't going to stop until she was forced to. She had one last move, a desperate, dangerous move. Because when cornered, my mother always found a way to twist the knife deeper. And just as the Chief Justice was about to deliver his decision, she stood up again, her voice trembling with rage. If you give this child to her, she spat, pointing at me, then I will reveal the truth about what happened with her father. The truth she has hidden all these years. Gasps filled the air. My knees went weak. The truth about my child's father. The one secret I had never dared to share was about to be exposed. The words struck me like a thunderclap. The truth about her father. My mother hissed, her fingers stabbing the air in my direction. The courtroom stirred in chaos. Whispers rose, heads turned, and even the Chief Justice leaned forward with sudden intensity. I froze, my chest tightening. My past, the one I had worked so hard to protect, the one I thought was buried, was clawing its way into the open. My mother's lawyer tried to restrain her, tugging at her sleeve, whispering sharply. But she yanked her arm free and stood taller, her face flushed with bitter triumph. You all think she's fit? That she's honest. My mother's voice rang with venom. Then let me tell you what she's been hiding. This child, her father abandoned them both. He wanted nothing to do with her. And she pointed at me again, her eyes blazing. She let him go. She didn't even fight to keep him. She wasn't strong enough. She failed as a partner, and she will fail as a parent. The room fell into stunned silence. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, piercing, questioning, judging. My heart pounded in my ears, and my breath came shallow. It was true. My child's father had walked away. He had turned his back on responsibility, leaving me to pick up the shattered pieces alone. And I hadn't begged him to stay. I had let him leave because I believed clinging to a man who didn't want us would only destroy me further. But how could I explain all that now, under the burning scrutiny of strangers and the cold sneer of my mother? Tears threatened to spill, but I clenched my fists against the table. If I broke now, she would win. The Chief Justice cleared his throat, his face grave. Is this true? He asked softly. I raised my head, meeting his eyes with every ounce of strength I had left. My voice trembled, but I spoke anyway. Yes, I said. It is true. He left. He didn't want this life, this responsibility. And I didn't chase him. Not because I was weak, but because I knew my child deserved better than someone who would only stay out of obligation. I chose to walk forward alone. And every day since, I have given my child every ounce of love, care, and stability I could. I may not be perfect, but I am present. I am devoted, and I will never abandon her. My voice cracked on the last words, but I didn't look away. The Chief Justice sat back, studying me with a gaze that was both piercing and compassionate. The silence stretched so long it felt like time itself had stopped. Then, slowly, he turned to my mother. Do you realize what you have done? His voice was low but thunderous. You would rather drag your daughter through shame, expose private wounds, and humiliate her in front of strangers, all to steal a child away? This is not love. This is cruelty disguised as concern. My mother's smirk faltered. You say she failed, the Chief Justice continued. I say she chose courage. She chose to raise her child without resentment, without bitterness. She chose love where there could have been hatred. That is strength. That is motherhood. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the courtroom. I pressed my hand over my mouth, tears flowing freely now. For the first time, my truth had been spoken aloud, not as a weapon but as a testament. But my mother wasn't finished. Her eyes burned with desperation, her voice rising. She will regret this. One day the child will resent her. And when that day comes, she will have no one. The Chief Justice slammed his gavel down, silencing her instantly. "Enough!" he roared. "This hearing is not about your pride, nor your vengeance. It is about the well-being of a child. And from what I have witnessed today, it is clear where that well-being lies." My heart stopped. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. I clutched my child's hand tightly, whispering a silent prayer. The Chief Justice straightened, his voice ringing with authority. "This court rules that custody remains with the mother. She is fit, capable, and above all, driven by love, something no accusation, no secret, no cruelty can diminish." The words crashed over me like a tidal wave. Relief, disbelief, joy, all tangled into one overwhelming surge. I broke into sobs, pulling my child into my arms, holding her as though the world itself could no longer pry us apart. But as I held her, I glanced up and saw my mother's face. It wasn't defeat I saw in her eyes. It was something darker, because when my mother lost power, she always looked for another way to strike. And I knew, deep in my bones, this battle wasn't truly over. The gavel's echo still lingered in the air, but for me, it was the sound of chains breaking. My child was safe. My love had been vindicated. For a fleeting moment, I thought it was finally over. But I should have known better. My mother never surrendered easily. Defeat, to her, was not a lesson but an insult, and insults demanded revenge. In the days after the verdict, she vanished from my life. No calls, no messages, no sudden visits. The silence was almost unsettling. I found myself listening for her footsteps, waiting for the next blow. And then it came. One morning, I opened the mailbox and found a thick envelope with an official seal. Inside was a fresh lawsuit, this time not for custody, but for guardianship rights. My mother was attempting a different route, hoping to exploit loopholes. Her argument, that my financial situation, though improving, was still unstable, and that my child deserved the security only she could provide. For a moment, despair clawed at me. How many battles would I have to fight before she stopped? How many courtrooms, how many accusations, how many nights spent crying into my pillow while my child slept? But then I remembered the Chief Justice's words. She chose courage, and I realized something important. Courage isn't a single act. It's a choice you make again and again, even when you're exhausted, even when you want to give up. So I chose it again. This time, though, I wasn't alone. The verdict had changed more than just my legal standing. It had opened eyes. Neighbors who once whispered began offering help. Old friends reached out, apologizing for their silence. Even strangers who had heard about my case offered words of encouragement. And in the middle of it all, my daughter thrived. She learned to walk, her tiny steps wobbling but determined. She learned to speak, her first words clumsy but beautiful. Every milestone reminded me what I was fighting for. When the second hearing came, I walked into the courtroom steadier, calmer. My mother sat across from me, her face hard, her eyes burning with the same fire of control that had fueled her all her life. But this time, something was different. The Chief Justice, the same one from before, presided again. As my mother launched into her arguments, painting herself as the savior and me as the stumbling, unfit mother, he listened in silence. When it was my turn, I didn't speak of law or finances. I spoke of love. I spoke of nights by the hospital bed, of laughter echoing through our small apartment, of the way my daughter reached for me with absolute trust. And then, something unexpected happened. The Chief Justice leaned forward. His expression softened, and said, "Madam, do you not see? You claim to act for the child's security, but what greater security is there than a mother's devotion? Money fades, circumstances change, but love endures. You have brought this child nothing but turmoil. If you truly care for her, you would stop this war. For the first time, my mother faltered. Her lips trembled, her eyes darted away, and though she didn't admit it, I saw the truth settle in. She had lost, not just in court, but in spirit. The case was dismissed, her petition denied. This time, she didn't file another. Walking out of that courtroom, my child in my arms, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. It wasn't just about winning. It was about surviving every attack, every wound, every betrayal, and still standing, still loving, still fighting for what mattered. And though my relationship with my mother might never heal, I realized something important that day. Sometimes the family you are born into tries to break you, but sometimes fate gives you a new family to build. One born not of blood, but of choice, love, and resilience. For me, that family was right there in my arms. My daughter looked up at me with her innocent eyes, and I knew. No court, no accusation, no betrayal could ever take her away. The Chief Justice's final words echoed in my heart. Motherhood is not proven by perfection. It is proven by presence. And you, above all, have been present. And with that, I stepped into a new chapter of life. No longer afraid of my mother's shadow, but ready to write my own story, for me and for her.